Okay, so welcome again. This is Jules Grandcier again from the European Space Agency, ESA, and it's a pleasure to see you here and to be able to introduce you, a true pleasure, I must say, to introduce you to a unique lineup of international astronauts from the 5 partner agencies of the International Space Station program. But before we start with your opening remarks and Q&A, I would like to leave the floor and the mic to our host today, Director of Ecological and Earth Sciences at UNESCO, Han Chunli.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I welcome you all, especially the crew of the space mission to UNESCO. Thank you for you all to come to the press conference. On behalf of UNESCO, I would like to welcome you to this one-year crew press conference, which aims to inform you about the first ever one-year-long mission of the 2 crew members to the International Space Stations. This is a particularly significant mission because it will advance our knowledge, how the human body reacts to long periods in space, and will present an excellent opportunity to strengthen international scientific cooperation. It is very appropriate at this press conference to take place in UNESCO premise because not only the science, the big word, the character S in UNESCO stand for science, but also because UNESCO's role in science is to promote the international cooperation in many areas of scientific mandate. Let me see that in the case of UNESCO, this international cooperation in science takes place mainly on the ground in the field ranging from the science, technology, innovation policy, capacity building for research, use of science to manage the planet freshwater resources, the oceans, and the terrestrial ecosystems, all in the interest of the peace and the sustainable development. UNESCO has worked with many space agencies to assist, in particular in developing countries, to access the benefit of space technology, especially remote sensing products, to help manage the environment in the context of UNESCO World Heritage Site and the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, 2015 is a very significant year to all of us. This year, this long one-year mission, space mission, starts at the time when international community will make important decisions on a new program for sustainable development of this planet and its people through the establishment of the Sustainable Development Goals, so-called SDGs, and what we term as the post-2015 development agenda. You know, the big issues, the challenges on the biodiversity loss, climate change, the management of our very limited water, freshwater resources, the ocean health, environmental stability, and the reduction of natural disasters are to be addressed in the new global agenda. 2015 will also be significant as a major conference on climate change, on climate, the COP21, are going to be held in Paris next year. As you know that as you, in your mission to look down the Earth from the International Space Station, be assured that space technology and the products of space exploration play and will continue to play a pivotal role to address the challenges our planet faces today and as a means of implementing in achieving sustainable development goals for the good future of all of us. UNESCO congratulates you all for this joint mission of Russian and American astronauts and consider it's a strong sign of renewed international commitment for the peaceful use of space and international cooperation in science. UNESCO wishes you a very successful mission. Thank you very much.
Han Chunli, thank you very much. So we said 1 year, the name says it's already 1 year mission. That's double the amount of the usual duration on board the space station. Scott, if I may start with you. What do you expect from this mission, 1 year on board the space station?
Well, thank you, Jules. And before I answer that question, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank ESA and UNESCO for hosting this event and setting it up, and also thank my astronaut and cosmonaut colleagues for joining us here today, especially Soichi and Jeremy, that don't get the privilege of flying in space as part of this this one-year mission. So, got to hand it to them for showing up for this today. Appreciate their efforts. What makes this exciting about, for me, this one-year flight is about the science and everything we're going to learn from expanding the envelope on the space station greater than what we've currently done. And if we're ever going to go to Mars someday, the International Space Station is really a great platform to learn much more about having people live and work in space for longer durations. It's close to the Earth, and it's a great orbiting facility. So this one-year flight is one of many stepping stones towards leaving low Earth orbit again. It's a focused effort to reach across international and technological boundaries to enhance our integrated science on board the space station. Now, we do science every day on the International Space Station, over probably 150 different type of investigations that are going on right now and have been going on since the space station started flying in 2000, the year 2000, when we had our first crews on board. However, for this flight, NASA has selected 19 collaborative investigations to evaluate the effects of longer duration spaceflight on humans. Roscosmos and the Russian Space Agency selected 14 investigations, and some of those investigations are joint investigations that Misha and I will be participating in together. As far as the U.S. science is concerned, and I think Misha's prepared to talk about the Russian science investigations, our 19 investigations are broken down into 7 different categories, from functional to behavioral health, visual impairment, metabolic, physical performance, microbial, and human factors investigations. So to kind of sum up the answer to Jules' question for me is what makes this so much different than the last time. Obviously the duration, but also my excitement is for the science and what we're going to learn on this nearly one-year flight. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I'm turning to Misha right now. You two will be spending 1 year on board the space station. You'll be living and working as part of the one-year crew. What do you expect from this flight, and what does it mean for you?
Well, all that Scott said is probably very accurate and describes our mission. I would like to add that it is a platform, as he said, a platform for further exploration to Mars, to the Moon. For further space exploration, it's an opportunity to push deeper into space, and it can serve as a stepping stone for that. The last long-term space mission was on the Mir station, and it brought major data for investigations and research about how humans will feel during long-term flights into space. I hope that our mission will be an opportunity, as Scott said, for others who will follow in our footsteps and take space exploration further. Now, of course, this is a scientific station. We will carry out many experiments, around 58 to be precise, mainly physical and chemical experiments, looking at processes and how materials react in space. We will also look at experiments involving human physiology and biology. Science is one of the reasons for which we are going to be flying to the space station, and it is one of the reasons why we're going to go there for a longer time. Thank you.
Andreas Mugens, and like I said, you are training currently for a spaceflight in September 2015. Can you tell us a bit more about how your mission will be linked to the one-year mission on the space station?
So 2015 is going to be a fantastic year on board the space station. Obviously, this is the first time we'll have 2 astronauts up there for an entire year. For personal reasons, it's also going to be a great year. This will be my first space flight, and I'm honored to be able to support the one-year mission in just a small way. Halfway through the mission of Scott and Misha, I'll be joining them for a short period to fly up a new Soyuz, and then I'll be returning in their Soyuz. The thing is, a Soyuz is rated for 6 months in space, so halfway through their mission, we'll do a Soyuz change out, and that'll give me an opportunity to support them and visit the space station. And of course, during the 10-day mission, we'll have a full program of science experiments, and that'll hopefully give scientists a chance to study not only short duration crew members, but also 6 months duration crew members and 1 year missions. And as Scott mentioned, the space station really is an ideal platform to build upon in our further exploration of the solar system. So I'm happy to be able to support it. 2015 is also going to be a really great year for the European Space Agency. We'll have 3 astronauts in space next year. Samantha Cristoforetti, my Italian colleague, is currently up there. She launched 3-4 weeks ago. I was at her launch in Baikonur supporting her, and she'll be there until May. I'll then fly in September, and then my British colleague Tim Peake will follow me in November and December for another 6-month mission. So this is a really great year, not just for the International Space Station program with the 1-year mission, but also for the European Space Agency with 3 astronauts on board the space station. So I'm really looking forward to next year.
Thank you, Andreas. And Soichi, like Andreas said, the 1-year mission on board the ISS, that's a very important step for the whole ISS program. What does it mean from a Japanese point of view for JAXA?
Yeah, thank you, Jules. And I would like to thank UNESCO for hosting us today. And I would like to congratulate Scott and Misha for a 1-year mission. And Scott and I was in ASCAN class of 1996. It goes long way, and we had a lot of a good time and bad time together. And Misha, of course, we flew together 5 years ago. Actually, we had a birthday together in 2010, and very happy to know that he has another birthday in space next year. And yeah, like Jules said, this 1-year crew, although Scott and Misha are the highlights of the mission, but it is not just for America and Russia, it's for all 5 international partners. Great achievement. JAXA has a biomedical experiment with Scott and Misha, and Andy actually worked with Japanese experimental module Kibo to launch a couple of small satellites using Kibo module. And of course, Canada has a great robotic arms to help support the space station operation. So the 1-year crew, 1-year mission is the great achievement of all 5 partners. Of course, it benefits all the countries around the world. This is the magnificent achievement of biomedical and science experiments, and it's the gap, bridging the gap between the ISS and to the space exploration, which coming in the coming years. And we are very happy to be a part of this big group. And also, I'd like to congratulate this crew as a president of Association of Space Explorers. Association of Space Explorers is a non-profit organization which started in France in 1985, and next year it actually marks the 30th anniversary. And once Andreas comes back to us, so we will congratulate him as the newest member, and Jeremy will certainly to follow us. And both Scott and Misha has been a great member, and we'll be having the great Congress next year while they are enjoying the space mission. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, like Soichi said, also Canada is very much involved in the ISS program. 1 year mission, 1 year on board the space station. What does it mean for the Canadian Space Agency?
Well, of course, as a proud partner of the International Space Station, Canada and the Canadian Space Agency, we're legitimately proud to be a part of this mission. It's very exciting for us. And while our support for a 1 year mission is very similar to a support for any expedition crew, as the ones that are going on right now, things like we will continue to leverage the International Space Station, the laboratory that it is for science that we feel is benefiting humanity on the ground. So that, of course, is something very exciting. And as you may know, our Canadian robotics are busy at work on board the International Space Station at all times. So during Scott's and Misha's mission, we'll be supporting things like station maintenance with the arm. Of course, they plan to do some spacewalks. And maybe something that's very important to them, Canadarm will be capturing visiting vehicles that are bringing oh so important supplies and experiments to and from the International Space Station. So this is continued work for Canada we think is of great benefit to the world. But personally, I'm actually very interested in this 1 year mission because I think it signifies something very significant. I find myself in front of young Canadians telling them about our space program and the exciting things that are coming in space. And I see this mission as signifying future exploration, leveraging the International Space Station to exciting new missions that challenge this human spirit of exploration. And when I had the opportunity to sit with Scott last night, I was asking him some questions about what it's like to prepare mentally for a 1 year mission. You know, I personally hope someday in the future to be part of some missions that take me beyond a low Earth orbit. And some of these missions will require significant periods of time in space. And I'm very interested in how one prepares for that. What are the concerns that a commander has for his crew when they're setting off on an exciting mission like this? I often tell young Canadians that during my lifetime, I fully expect to see humans walk on Mars and return to planet Earth. And I'm very inspired by this 1 year mission. I wish them the best of luck.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We'll now, if you please, take questions from the floor here. So please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Andre, TV Center, Russian TV channel. I have a question for Scott Kelly. Mr. Kelly, I'm sorry, what kind of challenges do you expect during a year in space? And did you have a chance to learn from previous Russian and Soviet experience on Mir station, at least in theory?
So, there are the challenges that you know and the challenges that you don't know are going to present themselves, and hopefully there will not be a lot of the latter. But in space, anything, you got to be prepared for anything that happens. I think the biggest expected challenge, obviously, will be the duration of the flight and the amount of work and just pacing. Myself and Misha pacing himself and the other crew members as well. I mean, 6 months in space is also a really long time, and having an appropriate pace is important. And I think it's even more important since Misha and I will be there twice as long. As far as the learning from the experiences of Russian cosmonauts that have flown a year or longer, I have spoken to some of them, and I have shared they have shared with me some of their experiences, and kind of right along the lines that I was thinking, that the pace of work is one of the most critical things.
Interrupt. Psychological, that probably colleagues that you talked to shared any specific thing that can happen on a year-long flight that was a surprise for you?
I have not spoke specifics with anyone, and if I come up with anything like that about a year and a half from now, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Another question from the floor here. Yes, please introduce yourself.
Добрый день, Вести. Расскажите, пожалуйста, про...
Vista, good afternoon. Can you tell us more about shooting on board and the photos and the filming? Are you taking cameras, or how's that going to happen?
Ну, это одна из...
Well, look, that's part of what we'll be doing on board. We'll be photographing the Earth, doing this from inside the station. We'll be trying, obviously, to convey that to young people. I'm sure they'll find that interesting. This might just not be the most important part of our work. The most important is going to be the science, which is complemented by the photo. So we'll be taking these things step by step and taking them one at a time. I don't think I can say much more than that.
Thank you. Now, another question from the floor? Okay, if we have no questions from the floor, I'd like to we've had a couple of questions coming in from our social media at ESA and NASA. So I'd like, on behalf of the millions of followers of ESA and NASA channels, to have Dan Hewitt from NASA Public Affairs and Marco Trovatillo from the ESA Communications Department ask 2 questions. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Jules. So this first one from one of our followers is for both Scott and Misha. What were some of the primary motivators for you guys to volunteer for this longer mission? Some personal motivators.
Yeah, when this idea first come up about having a year-long flight, it was about a year after I had gotten back from my last flight. It was when we first started talking about this. And at first, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't that interested because 6 months is a long time in space, and a year is, obviously twice as long. So, but after thinking about it for a while, I did want to fly in space again, and after giving it further thought and kind of mulling it over for a while, I realized that if I was to fly again another 6-month flight, it would be very similar to the last time. And I'm the type of person that likes challenges, and I thought the challenge, just because it's going to be twice as long, over time became appealing to me.
Marco?
Okay, there's a couple more questions on the psychological side of your experience. For example, one by Maria Paula at Cosmo Meadow on Twitter. And she asks how the overall psychological feedback during the whole year will work during the mission.
On the U.S. side, we have there are some psychological-based experiments, and one in particular is this journals experiment where you kind of write down you keep a journal essentially and write down your feelings and from a variety of themes. But also on board, we have psychological conferences with our psychological support team every other week. And I believe the Russian Space Agency and the other partner astronauts have a similar program.
Okay, there's one more question by Eddie on Twitter, and his question is: with the several experiments designed for the one-year crew, will they take part in any of the ongoing biomedical experiments?
Biomedical experiments, it's more important for our mission on board the station for me and Squatted. There is joint experiments, Russian Space Agency and NASA, and we will do it together. It helps us to understand how human can work on surfaces of planet after a long duration flight. It's a goal of our flight. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Misha was saying, there's, like I said earlier, there's a lot of investigations that go on board the space station at any one time, 100, 150. And we're participants in those investigations as well, both as scientific subjects, but also the operator of the experiments, whether they're life science experiments or experiments from many of the other disciplines that we have on board, just like any of the other of our fellow crew members.
Thank you very much, Scott. We are not alone here, I must say. We are live on NASA TV, and we have also our colleagues at Houston Johnson Space Center. People have gathered there in the Studio B, and if we are ready, I would like to call Robert Perlman for a first question from Johnson Space Center.
Hi, this is Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. A question for Scott. Okay. Around this time of the year, people make New Year's resolutions, and yours and Mikhail's New Year is going to be among the more unique amongst humanity. I wonder if you can share what your resolutions or goals, personal goals for this flight are. We know what NASA and the international partners want to achieve. What do you personally want to achieve from this mission? What do you personally want to achieve from this mission?
So for me personally, this flight is not any different than any of my 3 previous flights. My goals have always been no one gets hurt, we don't break anything, and we leave as friends. And that was the case I felt on my first flight, which was only 8 days. Seemed like that was a long time. I flew with Jean-Francois Clairvoix, who's in the back room. Long time ago. We were both much younger then. That was an 8-day flight, and then my next flight was 13 days, and then 159, and they're getting longer.
Okay, then we'll go to Mariam Kramer from space.com for your question. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Miriam Kramer with space.com. I am hoping to know, so what can you learn during this one-year mission that maybe you won't be able to learn during a 6-month mission? And also, how do your families feel about you flying to space for 1 year?
Long-duration spaceflight presents a lot of challenges to the human body, specifically with regards to muscle loss, bone loss, vision issues that we've recently realized that people are having, the effect on your immune system, the effect of radiation on our bodies, and if we're ever going to go beyond low Earth orbit for longer periods of time, understanding those effects over longer periods of time are very important. So if a mission to Mars is going to take a 3-year round trip, we need to know better how our body and our physiology performs over durations longer than what we've previously on the space station investigated, which is 6 months. And perhaps there's a cliff out there with regards to some of these issues that we experience, and perhaps there aren't, but we won't know unless we investigate it. And also, there's the psychological aspect of staying in space for longer periods of time, and there's we have things we can learn from that. And also the space station as a whole, I think, is doesn't quite answer your question specifically, but I think one of the greatest parts of the greatest investigation of the International Space Station is the space station itself. How we have this orbiting laboratory, built by this great international partnership that flies around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour, makes oxygen from our urine, water from our urine into oxygen, scrubs the atmosphere, has this hardware that keeps us alive for very long periods of time, and has been doing so since the beginning of the last decade. So there's a lot to learn by flying in space for longer periods of time, I think.
Thank you, Scott. We go back to the NASA phone bridge for a question from Scott Dunn from AP. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello. I have a question, please, from Mr. Kornienko. 2 years ago, sir, you said that when you told your wife about the mission that she cried. And I'm wondering, how is your wife adapting to the fact that you will be soon gone for an entire year? And your daughter as well. How old is she, and what do they think about your endeavor?
Thank you for your question. When my wife knows about my long duration flight, she's crying. But now she very support me, my family support me, and it's very helped me to go through the troubles in the flight, in the preparation to flight. As to my daughter, she is 32 all the year, and you can congratulate me. I am becoming grandpa. Thank you.
No, we have many.
No, it
Although
it
I'm not
happened
one of them, thank
4
God.
months ago. I had preparation at the same time in Houston with Scott.
Well, Misha, congratulations for sure, indeed. We have a last question from the NASA phone bridge. That's from Irene Klotz from Reuters. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much. I actually have two questions. The first is I was wondering if Scott or Mikhail, either of you, have had an opportunity to speak directly to Dr. Polyakov and some of the other, I guess there's 3 other cosmonauts who have made flights of at least a year in duration, and if so, what they told you about being in space for that long. And then also the second question is about any kind of engineering exercises that might be planned to prepare for Mars missions that you guys might be doing, specifically things like at one time there was a discussion about isolating you and part of the space station to simulate the time delays and so forth that you'd have in communications from Mars. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Irene, I've spoke to some of the cosmonauts, not specifically Polyakov, who has the longest duration of days in space, over 400, but spoke to some of the other cosmonauts, and the advice they said was, pace yourself, basically, simply. As far as the types of engineering investigations you're talking about with regards to going to Mars, there was some discussion at one time about us isolating ourselves in one of the modules on the space station. At the time, we were talking about the MLM, which has not yet flown, the Russian MLM. So from a practical perspective, we really couldn't do that now. It would really affect the other operations on board the International Space Station if we were to isolate ourselves in, let's say, the service module or Node 3. So there really was no further, that discussion really didn't get very far.
As regards isolation, the crew members for a year-long flight, or in an effort to simulate a flight to Mars, then, as Scott said, it would be possible to simulate this. It would have been possible to do it in other circumstances, but I think that we will, in time, overcome all the difficulties, and scientists will understand whatever they want to find out through the experiments that will be conducted. Thank you.
Do we have another question or some more questions in the room here? Yes, yes, please.
Bonjour.
Hello, I am from Forme Mathématique. I'm sorry to ask you the question in French, but I hope there will be interpretation. We have no doubt about the support that your family were providing, but what they think and what will their psychological reaction be to your flight? Will there be some monitoring for their psychological status? Yes, thank you very much.
Psychological preparation for your family. Is there anything specific for this flight? Any specific psychological support to your family?
At NASA, we do have that available. I'm not going to go into specifics about specific individuals, but NASA does provide that a psychological support structure for our families if that's necessary. Yes.
Merci. Permettez-moi de...
Yes, well, I will also put a question to you in French. I understand that you will be conducting a number of experiments relating to the human being, the human body, looking at what's the biology, trying to conduct studies and investigations in the lab. Are you also going to look at Earth science and environment? Over and beyond human biology, are you going to look at Earth sciences and the biology or the science of the environment? We've just had the COP20 in Lima. COP21 is coming up next year in France. So I'm sure that the French would be most interested in hearing what sort of experiments or investigation you will be conducting over and beyond what you're doing on human beings, but also possibly relating to the Earth as such, the environment and climate change.
That's so we understand you're gonna have experiments about the human body and human physiology. The question is, do you have also in the program some experiments on the Earth, like geological experiments?
Yeah, because
oui, yes.
The COP l'année prochaine, c'est.
As I said, France is
host country for COP of the United Nations climate change conferences. So that's why we are interested in know whether you will conduct the study about the Earth, not only human bodies.
Well, the International Space Station is not only an excellent platform for human research, but also, as you bring up, for studying the Earth itself. And from an astronaut's point of view, one of the main ways is through taking pictures that we share and that scientists on the ground analyze. But the space station itself is also an excellent platform to use for scientific observations. And a lot of this research not only takes place inside, but also on the outside of the space station. So we have a lot of different experiments that are mounted on the outside of the space station, looking both down at the Earth, but also at our sun, for example. And there are a lot of very interesting experiments going on right now, but also coming up. In 2016, the European Space Agency will launch, for example, an experiment called ASIM, the Atmosphere Space Interactions Monitor, which will study some of these gigantic lightning strikes that actually shoot upwards into space rather than down to the ground. These are lightning strikes that can shoot all the way up to about 80 or 90 kilometers, and we're talking about a tremendous amount of energy that's released. Normally, we're not aware of this because obviously we're at the below the thunder cloud, so we don't see what's above them. But the space station is an excellent platform from which to observe some of these huge lightning strikes called elves, blue jets, red sprites, and so forth. And as there's such a large amount of energy involved, they do, or we suppose that they must have some kind of influence on our atmosphere. And so that's the purpose of this experiment that will be launched in 2016. So yes, there are a lot of very interesting Earth observation experiments going on using the space station as a platform.
Another question from the floor, une autre question pour les gens.
Any other questions from the floor? Hello, I will also put my question to you in French. I would like to ask Jeremy Hansen. You said that you're very excited about 2015. Do you feel that in the months to come, or maybe years to come, the space programs will benefit from more support from states? We've spoken over the recent times of budget cuts and monetary constraints. Do you think that space agencies will benefit from more support from their respective governments in the near future?
Bien sûr, on commence de...
Yes, of course. We're seeing more commitment for space agencies, and I think that that will continue. I don't think this is just at industry level, but I think that states will also provide further support to their space agencies and space programs.
These pieces we're putting together that are these capabilities. I see that right now we're in low Earth orbit. We're learning a lot about spacecraft systems that need to survive long duration in space, how the human body can survive these long duration missions. And then the next logical steps are for us to leave low Earth orbit again and to start to venture out. And we talk about a number of different mission objectives. Right now we speak a lot about, recently we had the amazing results of Rosetta and landing on an asteroid, but sending humans to an asteroid, whether we bring that asteroid into a lunar orbit to have astronauts explore it, or we send astronauts out further into space. And we know how to do all these things. But as you're alluding to, there's a timing that makes sense, and there's a natural stepping stone in evolution to when we can afford the benefits that those missions and expeditions are going to bring back for us. We'd all love to go do them right away. Just like I'd like to fly, I'd like to join Scott and Misha on their mission. That'd be amazing. But there's a certain prudence required to make sure we get there in an economical fashion. But these, you see, I mean, some people are disillusioned by what they see. They don't think we're moving fast enough, but not me personally. I think we are. If you look, we're taking continuous steps. And I live, you don't see it every day like we do, but we live this, we live and breathe space every day. We talk to hundreds of people who are working on this program, and they're absolutely amazing minds that are all working together, come together as an international community, and we're accomplishing amazing things. It's pretty awesome.
Merci, Jeremy. Une autre question du...
Any other questions from the floor?
Okay, then I would like to go back to our social media folks here, Dan Hewitt from NASA Public Affairs and Marco Trovatilo from the ESA Communication Department, for a question on behalf of the followers of ESA and NASA.
Thank you, Jules. So this one comes in, and I would actually pose it to all of our panelists if they could just give a couple of quick thoughts. Since the International Space Station program, so much of what we're doing is getting us ready to go beyond. How possible is it that we will see a manned Mars trip in our lifetime?
Okay, but I'll start because I'm at this end, I guess. I hope it'll happen in my lifetime. We, I think, have most of the technology to do it now. It's a matter of having the public and political willpower and want to invest the amount of money it's going to cost. But I think in the next 30 to 40 years we'll see that, hopefully sooner.
Maybe some earlier. I'm optimist in that case, but to do it we have to join our powers. It's not only one country, it's international program. If we will do it, it will be earlier. Thank you.
Well, I would agree with Scott. Where we are today in terms of technology, we're much closer to a Mars mission than we were in the start of the 60s to landing men on the moon. So it's definitely a question of political will for us to see a Mars mission.
Yeah, well, I cannot predict the future, but the important thing is we continue our joint program together and move the program forward. And Andreas mentioned about the Rosetta. We also, JAXA has a Hayabusa 2, and just make sure that all the people around the world is continuously looking toward the future space exploration, and someday somebody will step on Mars.
For me, I'm very optimistic about it. I honestly believe that it's going to happen in my lifetime, as long as I live a decent lifetime. And the reason I say that is because we absolutely know how to do it. There are technical challenges, there are risks that need to be weighed, but we know how to do it. It's really just a financial decision about when the right time is to do it. And a lot of that comes down to the cost of access to space. And that's what really excites me about commercial space, the commercial space industry, because that is driving the cost of access to space down, which changes everything. And it will enable us ultimately to fly more hardware into space. There's a really fascinating technology in the space station right now. Probably while we're talking right now, there's a 3D printer that's making certain objects, so we understand 3D printing in space. But you can only imagine the implications of being able to print and create new objects in space, and how that reduces the problem of getting to a place like Mars when you don't have to bring as much mass with you. So all these things are starting to add together to say, hey, we know how to do it, and this is going to make it cheaper, more affordable for us. And that, to me, says it's going to happen in the not-so-distant future.
Thank you, Marco. You have a question on behalf of the ESA followers?
Yes, both the NASA and the ESA followers. And it is a question by Mr. Robert Nakin, who is obviously the teacher of an 8th grade multimedia class, which wants to know, how do you actually exercise in space? And if I may, I would like also to pass this on for a short statement by everybody of you. We would, of course, also be interested to know, how do you physically exercise for space on Earth? Thank you.
Yeah, about the exercise equipment on the space station, we have lots of different kinds of exercise equipment. My favorite was the kind of weightlifting machine. Of course, weightlessness, we have to use power of air pressure, and some kind of a mechanical resistance. But we place this near the Earth viewing window. So every time I do exercise, I see the Sahara Desert passing by, the beautiful coral reefs is right in front of me. So that's the very most rejoicing time. Of course, it's not just for viewing pleasure, but it's we use a lot of biomedical equipment associated with the exercise. And I believe both Scott and Misha do hundreds of hours for exercising on their one-year mission.
Scott, do you have to do more sports daily on board the space station if you stay for a year?
There's actually a study that some astronauts have done recently, which is called SPRINT, which allows us to exercise at a higher intensity, but not as frequently. And I could have chosen to do that. I elected to stay with the protocol I did last time, which is basically exercising 6 days a week, about 30 to 40 minutes of aerobic activity, and about anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half of the weightlifting training, depending on how quickly you want to get through with it and how fast you do it. So yeah, so we exercise a lot on board the space station, absolutely.
Thank you for that. I just want to go back to Houston in Studio B with Robert Perlman for another question. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. It was mentioned about the psychological challenges of a one-year mission and family support. I'm wondering about the support of crewmates and the friend, specifically how good of friends you are now between Scott and Mikhail, and how important it is to get along with your crewmates during a challenging flight like this.
Yeah, Robert, we are very good friends, and we're going to be better friends after a year in space. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But it's important to keep track of your fellow crew members, and you know, whether it's a 6-month flight or, you know, even a you know, an 8-day flight like my first flight. We rely on each other for our lives, literally, and so we have to take care of one another and look out for one another. And it's you know, it's one of the most important things about being an astronaut or a cosmonaut, and being a good crew member and a teammate.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to ask if there's anyone left on the NASA phone bridge for a question. Okay, apparently not. So, it left me to just ask one question. Yes, you have a question here. Please go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, since the relation between Russia and United States are poor right now because of the Ukraine crisis. What is your reaction, the fact that you are going to work together in the space for 1 year? Does that inspire you something special?
Yeah, I would just have to refer to my last answer, basically. And, you know, we rely on each other implicitly for our lives. I mean, there are things that Misha and the cosmonauts that I count on for them, and, you know, in an emergency situation, and they likewise count on me. So any you know, political issues that exist between our countries is something we don't even discuss. You know, we're great friends, we're colleagues, we're professionals, and you know, that's the way it has to be.
And your colleague? Yes.
I absolutely agree with Scott. There is no borders in space between us, and it's great example how we can work together, especially for politics on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spasiba. Une autre question?
Any other question?
Yes, please.
Excuse me. Est-ce que vous allez amener?
Will you be taking anything special with you? A token? Would you take a token with you to carry it into space to keep you company for a year? Have you thought about that?
So any symbolic objects that you will take with you on the space station?
Well, the way it was translated to me, a token to keep me company for a year. I'd like to be able to do that, but that's not allowed. But anyway, I think what you're referring to is any kind of like souvenirs and stuff. And yeah, we do fly stuff like that. Mostly, you know, you can fly a certain amount of items for friends and limited amount of items for friends and organizations, your colleges, things like that we tend to do. But I'm not flying anything specific.
I'm sure you'll be flooded with requests as from now, Scott. This is going on TV. Misha, any specific objects, any specific things that you will take with you on board the space station for psychological support?
Of course, it's first of all, it's my private things. It's a photo of my family. It's actually we can't take a lot of things, private things, to space. Only 1 kilo. If I understand questions right, and it's most likely my family. My father, he was a pilot. My mother, unfortunately, they're gone for right now. My family, my grandson, daughter. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question from the floor, maybe? No? So, leaves us to thank you very much, all the partner agencies of the ISS, NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, JAXA, and CSA for joining us today. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to UNESCO for hosting this event. Thank you to NASA TV for relaying us on the web. Now you'll have the opportunity to have a photo opportunity with the participants and individual interviews. Thank you very much.